say in Hebrew, Am Yisrael Chai, and the Jewish state will live forever.
Israel is forever.
Forever.
Israel is forever.
Forever.
The focal point for my father at the end of his life was Israel, and he kept going back to Israel and prophesying over Israel and over Bibi Netanyahu and the enemies of Israel, and seeing and revealing certain things to help them. And that's important for us personally in looking at what happened in his life, because up to a certain point he was a
replacement
theologist. And then Christy's mother came along and said, hang on, Kim, there's some things you need to learn. And once he grew in his understanding.
Dad had got onto the kingdom message, and he was all about the kingdom message. And that's why I was speaking about it on the last clip that we did, is because we went through all of that.
Yes.
We went through all of those movements, and we saw the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of his life, he was all about taking the Bible literally.
And that's when the prophecies and what he was seeing got to, it escalated rapidly to a level where he was seeing with such accuracy so many things. And it was with that revelation in himself that then accelerated his prophetic gift. And up until the very end of his life, he was so passionate about Israel and so supportive and connected, and even meeting with the mayor of Jerusalem and all sorts of things. And so...
You know what I notice about people who are confused or don't understand end time is that actually they're also anti-Semitic.
Yes.
So when you have that spirit, which is the spirit of Osama bin Laden, it's the spirit of Adolf Hitler, it's the spirit of Pharaoh, you're really on the wrong side.
Wow.
So if you get over that tradition, men's opinion, and denominational tradition about the church replace Israel. No, the church has a very special place. We're already very elevated in God's heart and mind and plan. But you don't replace Israel, then the end time begins to make sense. The book of Revelation is a very, very Jewish sounding book.
Yes.
And it refers to a Jewish temple. It refers to the Jewish 12 tribes. It has the only reference of hallelujah 4 times in the New Testament.
Wow.
So it's very Jewish, and maybe that's why Christians may not actually understand end time so much, is because we have so many hundreds of years of tradition that suppress a really just very simple understanding of God's plan. God has a plan for nations. God has a plan for us, which we are clear about in terms of the gospel of righteousness, the gospel of my salvation. We're clear God has a plan for me. But what about the gospel of the kingdom?
The big picture.
That God has a plan. Psalms 2 says that Jesus died to save nations, not just people. And his last words, his great commission was, go make disciples of nations. His plan was bigger. His plan was global. So Israel is a very special nation that was supposed to be a prototype.
Right.
It's a prototype of what a nation can be if it had laws that were different from everyone else. If it had a leadership that was different from everyone else. And it's really amazing. Just take one thing. I'm speaking so much right now about justice because God's laid it on my heart. But think about how just God's word is, how just God's system is in Israel, had they followed it. Now, remember today, they're not following it because they really came back from World War II as migrants of Europe, and they brought back a lot of European, culture. But one of the things I love about the Bible is you got 10 commandments. Can you imagine if Congress passed only 10 laws and no more? What a dream.
Good point.
What a dream that would be. What a prototype Israel was and should be. It still has a destiny to be a prototype. And that's why we're going to have a millennium to live out the plan that was thwarted by sin and by Satan. And because it was thwarted, then Gentiles got to come in. But I just love that the system that God made for Israel is the best. You can't improve on it. even Israel, the Jews are trying to improve on it. They're trying to change it. But you can't. Whether you're Jewish or Gentile, that's the best system for a nation. And we're to look at that as a model for righteousness, for justice. And so much more we can talk about. We can talk about, I think your dad loved talking about King David. I love talking about King David.
He loved King David. King David was his absolute favorite.
Favorite book in the Bible, yeah.
Yes, he loved King David. He, of course, my dad being an incredible musician that he was and worshiper that he was, there were a lot of parallels in his life and that of King David.
Yes.
I mean, I've read through his journals, and that is the name. That's the character in the Bible that he most definitely favored. And he would often speak about how King David would speak to his own soul and encourage his own soul. And he does teachings on that. And so he really examined the life of King David to a great depth, amongst many others. But definitely King David was his favorite.
And the church is supposed to examine the life of King David because we're supposed to rebuild the tabernacle of David.
Yes.
Right.
And what is this about, right? And King David is another prototype for Christians, more written about him than any other Bible character in the Old Testament. And God often speaks to me about King David. And that's my favorite study. My mother says, out of all my teachings, if you want to get something from our, Discover website, my mother says the best thing that she likes is my teachings on the life of David, yes. King David. And one of the things that he said the Lord told him was that he who rules over men must be just.
Yes.
This issue of justice is rarely touched upon by Christian pastors.
Yes.
And David is a prototype of that. And then he wrote the Psalms.
Yes.
So if you want to go just study the life of King David, you look at his dealings with justice. He went through many unfair, unjust situations. How did he deal with it? You go to the book of Psalms. And we have a word for it, very theological. It's called imprecatory. He spoke God's justice over a situation, and it happened.
No wonder he was the apple of his eye. Yes.
And, speaking about this, just how all of it kind of links, like what you were saying about how there's been so many years of tradition, I think it's robbed the church of so much. There's, where before Martin Luther came through, and we know he went a little crazy at the end there, but when he got the revelation that the just shall live by faith, it changed everything for everybody. And I think that with revelation coming to Christians, it's something we really need to actively pursue, specifically regarding Israel, because Isaiah, hundreds of years before, well, thousands really, Isaiah 66:8, can a nation be born in a day? And it happened on May the 14th, 1948, which was in the last 100 years, which is crazy when you think about all the generations that have come. And you were saying how Israel's got a special place, of all the nations of the world, you're speaking about nations. God said, Israel's the place where I'm choosing to place my name. Jerusalem is the city where I choose to place my name. And although God dwells everywhere, we know that Jesus walked in Israel. It was his footsteps that were there, and we can go to these places and see where Jesus was. I mean, for me, there's nothing quite like being on the Sea of Galilee and looking around going, man, these mountains witnessed it. Like the things we read suddenly come to life. And obviously not everybody has the opportunity to go, but if there was only one place I could go to in my entire life, I would definitely choose Israel, because it's done something incredible. Just of all the times I've read the Bible, and sometimes it kind of just starts to feel a little bit like a story, and it feels like I went from a black and white story to a full color show. That's what it felt like for me, what the revelation that God was able to give me when I was actually there walking in the land. And I just know how important it is that we watch that. This is the place where the presence of God so filled the temple. When Solomon dedicated the temple, it says that the priests couldn't even stand to minister because there was literally a glory cloud of God. And when there's referencing to how the glory of God will cover the entire earth, you were speaking about Israel being a prototype. I really do see that where it's a typology. There's something there where God wants all of us to be able to experience his presence in a very real, tangible way. And there's obviously so much to Israel. There's so much to watch there, but it really is the passion of my heart for people to understand. And you were also speaking about how it is actually kind of simple. God picked Israel. He chose her, Genesis 12:3. That's where God made the covenant with Abraham. That's everlasting. And we're seeing kind of all of these things coming together like a giant puzzle starting to fit together, and there really aren't that many pieces left.
Well, they've got plans to build the temple.
They do.
It's just amazing what's going on in the news right now.
They already got Trump and Cyrus on the coin.
They have got
They
Trump
got
and
the
Cyrus
shekel.
on the
They've got the
coin.
coin.
They've
How
got-
prophetic is that?
Yeah, it's awesome.
They've even got the red heifer.
The red heifer is something that Madame has been
Yes.
very excited about.
Well, the red heifer.
What's the news on the red heifer at this point?
We're still
Well, I
watching
believe
it.
that red heifer that was born on
The
the
17th
17th day of the 7th month could be.
Is it still red?
Yes.
Because that's the
It
key
cannot
thing.
have a blemish, not a
Yeah.
spot or a blemish. And this red heifer, so far, so good. But you see, they have to wait for 2 years before they can actually slaughter the red heifer.
It's not allowed to have more than 2
Oh,
years.
no, they're going to slaughter it?
Of course, they have to slaughter it because they use the ashes of
Forgot
the
about
red
that
heifer.
part. I hadn't thought about
Okay,
it.
so you must remember that
No, I do.
in the Jewish tradition they have to slaughter the red heifer because it's for purification, and Christy can go into the whole routine of how everything was done. But look, they're getting back to their tradition of what they used to do back in the day, in the old days, and they with sacrificing. Because they were sacrificing for the sins of the Jewish nation. And the red heifer, this particular red heifer, was born on the
It was the 17th day.
17th day of the 7th month. And I find that interesting because of the fact that Noah's Ark rested on Mount Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month. And Jesus was crucified on the 14th day of the 7th month, and he rose again on the 17th day of the 7th month. Now, because I'm a Chuck Missler student, I believe that every thing in the Bible, date, every detail, is there by divine design. And the fact that those two events correlate with the red heifer that has the same date is something.
And it's about purification, about cleansing.
It's something significant to take note of. It's going to take 2 years for this red heifer to get to maturity where they're allowed to slaughter it. But so I think that within the next 2 years, we'll definitely know whether that temple is going to be built on that Temple Mount.
This just popped in my head now, is that at Trump's inauguration, the number 7 was in there too. It wasn't he? It was his
he was 70
Yes.
years old, 7 months and 7
That's
days
right.
old on inauguration day.
And so that's
So his
also
birth had to
lining
be
up with
timed.
it. Yes,
Definitely.
very interesting.
All these
point,
things
that.
are very, very interesting to look at and just watch, because we don't know for sure anything. But it's good to be able to notice some of these things.
I just want to say, God has, when you look at Israel, what you do see is that God has a plan for his enemies.
Yeah.
And his plan for the enemies is unconditional surrender. There is no other option.
Yes.
If you're an enemy of God, God demands of you unconditional surrender. And whether you do it now, in his will, to your benefit, or you do it on the day of judgment, it will be a total unconditional surrender of all the enemies of God.
Yes.
And I think people need to remember the end time is a very positive message.
Yes.
And even the prophetic word that we said a couple of clips ago about Matthew 24 verse 14 says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world as a witness unto all nations," is victory. We win.
And then
We
the end
win.
will come.
We win. And they have tried to stop the gospel.
Right.
They have killed the messengers. They have burned the book. They're trying to censor us, your ministry, my ministry on the internet.
Yes, they
and
are.
you'd never know that unless you are a creator of content and you realize how much they push back. They are monitoring this and they don't want people to know. But I read through end times, I read in Matthew 24, Jesus' words that in the end, we're on the winning side.
Yeah.
Why would you want to be on any other side? You should choose Jesus. You should follow Jesus because it's already written that he wins in the end.
Yes. And we're looking at the big picture. So we're not taking the Bible out of context. The Bible is a whole drama that is being played out. And we're part of this drama. And it's just so unbelievable to me that God has chosen us to be here on planet Earth at this time. We're pretty special. I mean, he chose the disciples to be there at that time. And so I believe that we're living in unbelievable times. And for people not to take note of this is what the enemy wants. He doesn't want anybody to take notice of what's actually going on in the world. And we need to have our eyes open. We need to be watching, because there's a reward to be watching. There's a crown to be given to you for watching. You know, I speak about the 5 crowns, and these 5 crowns are the rewards that you get for doing certain things and overcoming in your life. And so for me, overcoming is part of me being a Christian. I'm not saved by my works, but I am given rewards for my works. And so that is my ultimate message.
Do you want to go, Pastor Steve, or are you good? I feel like we could kind of just keep talking.
I had
okay?
one little thing
Donné
I wanted
has
to
one
add.
little
I just
thing
wanted
she'd like
Pastor
to add.
Steve to know, I don't know if you know this or not, but my father had prophesied that he saw something happening between the United States of America and Israel, and he saw dancing and rejoicing in the streets of Jerusalem. He prophesied this years ago. And my mother and I went to Israel this past May, and we were there when the embassy move happened, and we were actually able to witness. And as we drove into the city, they had billboards and signs everywhere that said, "Trump is a friend of Zion." And my heart was so filled with joy and pride for my father, and also sadness too that he wasn't there to see it. But I literally witnessed the dancing and rejoicing in the streets of Jerusalem when the embassy move happened, and what it meant to the Jewish people, and what it means to the world and the time that we're in right now. And when my dad used to say, when God speaks to you, it's the last comfortable day of your life, because the enemy will come against you more and more as you push forward and are walking in his will and obeying him and doing what he's telling you to do. And so you're seeing this censorship in our social media. I have a YouTube channel. I've been censored. I know you have too. You'll get those messages, and we're not going to monetize you. And then next thing, it's difficult to find your videos, and you're wondering why. And so that's definitely a real thing. And I know you've dealt with it, and I've dealt with it. But that is the enemy's pushing against us. And that kind of thing motivates me even more. And it makes me say, okay, I know I'm doing the right thing. And I feel the same way about you, Pastor Steve. So I just wanted to throw that in there before we close.
The enemy's always tried to silence the message. Always, from the get-go. When Jesus was born, Herod wanting to kill all the little boys that were of that age. The mission of the enemy has always been to silence the message of the mission of God. And that is why we forge ahead, and that is why we do what we do. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We could actually probably sit here for a year and keep talking, but don't worry, we won't. Not now, but we're very grateful that Pastor Steve was able to join us, and we look forward to doing a lot more with him in the future.
And just so everybody knows, this is Pastor Steve Cioccolanti.
Cioccolanti. Oh, Cioccolanti is good too.
Cioccolanti. What are the origins of your name?
Cioccolanti is Italian, so the anti is usually the suffix for a profession. So we think Cioccolanti is a chocolate maker.
What a wonderful job.
Yeah,
We love that.
Yeah.
Us chocolate lovers over here. I'm very happy to hear that.
You can remember every time you see chocolate, I say just say a 1-minute prayer for Pastor Steve Cioccolanti. Then I will need all those prayers, and
A lot of praise.
That's beautiful.
Be-
Love it. So you can, if you want to have a look at your website, can you tell the people what your website is and how they can find?
Easiest way is just look up Discover Ministries, and you'll find discover.org.au is our main website. Obviously, we're on all the different social media. Look up Discover Ministries and YouTube, and you will find exactly that, Discover Ministries.
Wonderful YouTube videos, incredible teachings. So
Thank
you'll
you.
definitely be blessed.
Make sure that you go and check those things out and follow Pastor Steve on all of those different things. So Discover Ministries Australia, that is discover.org.au. Thank you guys so much for watching, and God bless.
We say in Hebrew, Am Yisrael Chai, and the Jewish state will live forever.
Israel is forever.
Forever.
Israel is forever.
Forever.
Israel is forever.
Forever.
Israel is